All right. Start what you just said, Danny. Lefty, go for it. Hit me.
Well, I was listening to Dave from X22, and sounds like it's not actually over. There's a lot of stuff going on.
What does that mean?
Yes, you check out that episode from last night.
Yeah. As in they're going to kick the can down the road further, or it's not over, like you feel like you're back in the game? Because I never left the game.
I mean, it sounds like letting the pervert walk in was part of the plan.
Yeah, that's what they've been saying. But some people even say he's like an actor. I don't know how you feel about that. But anyway, stick with the sort of less
the thing is,
yeah,
all the evidence is like, I don't know what the word for it is, but it's not like solid proof. It's like numerological and that sort of symbolic. It's symbolic and numerological. And within that realm, it's very compelling. It's very compelling numerology and
I don't think that's gematria. Hit me with some of your Hebrew gematria.
I don't know gematria, but just, you know, the dates on the Q drops and the thing that Flynn said about 30 more days and then the done in 30. Yeah. So basically they're predicting that January 31st is
right.
like Freedom Day. Now,
10 days of darkness, that would fit because there was 10 days of actual darkness in the White House.
Right. It all fits. Like the whole thing like comes together around that date, January 31st. The problem is when that date comes, nothing's going to happen.
I know. I was going to say, because if they give you a hard date, that tells their enemies a hard date. So it's almost impossible to do what they're doing. I think they should just stick with the vagaries, you know, and say like it could be any time between February to March, the end of March, and then whatever, April 1st. But April 1st is just a joke, right? It's like April Fool's Day. So that if they give us April 1st as a hard date and then they don't pull the trigger then I'll be very angry with these people. Juan 07, talking to you, Juan.
Fuck you.
That's a mighty large thing of juice you got there, buddy.
And it's Joey-ish.
Not a big fan of the fructose. It's bad for you, man.
Why?
Fructose, bad for your liver.
Yes, Rob, eating fruit is bad for you.
Fruit juice is bad for you. Like the only fruit that is arguably good for you is right off the vine. Because it's not natural to leave like a bunch of fruit sitting or to juice it and leave that juice sitting around. And it converts to fructose, the bad sugar. So there's good sugar and there's bad sugar. There's glucose and there's fructose.
Okay.
And fructose is the one that makes you, gives you diabetes, insulin resistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the impeachment trial is looking like it's going to be the big reveal. Like he got himself impeached the second time on purpose.
Okay.
So that they could have a trial. And at the trial, he can bring out all the evidence.
Yeah, because
they kind of have to cover it because it's his impeachment. How can they not cover it? Although I wouldn't put it past them to only, cover like 5-second sound bites where he farts and not cover anything else. That I wouldn't put that past them, actually.
Yeah. Didn't they do that? Didn't like Eric Swalwell like fart on camera or something? And
I don't know.
They focused on it. That was pretty funny. deep stank, as they say on Edge of Wonder. That's the deep stank. I have an Edge of Wonder shirt on.
Ah, very nice.
5G kills.
I have no shirt on.
Oh my gosh.
I forgot to put one
We
on.
just lost all our viewers. Oh my god. Or gained some. I don't know. I like that you did that.
Are you feeling attracted?
I'm feeling uncomfortable.
Okay, so you're not in touch with your feelings, I see.
I guess discomfort could be mistaken for an odd attraction.
Okay, so we talked about the Q plan stuff the first podcast, and we tried it the second time, and now we're getting into it again. I want to get to a different topic.
Okay.
I want to talk about how the right is partially responsible for all this crap.
That's me. I'm the right.
That's you, buddy.
You're the left.
Because we know that the left is like the primary avenue through which the technocrats introduce their new ideas, because the left is the side of new ideas. So if you're going to introduce a new idea, you're going to do it through the left. And that's why the left is the side that's always pushing forward with the tech and the, all the technocratic stuff, including the pandemic crap and the World Economic Forum crap and the dark side of the climate change agenda and all that. The left is the one pushing forward with it. But I contend that the right is equally responsible, because the right ignored problems for so long and gave the left a sense of hopelessness and desperation and a feeling that the problems would never, ever, ever be addressed. And so they became desperate and radicalized. And then as soon as somebody comes along and says, we will solve the problem of climate change, they're gonna go along with it because, hey, he's the only guy who's even bothering to address it. The other side doesn't even want to talk about it. They think the whole thing is just fake. So, even if the one guy who comes along and talks about it is a total fascist who literally sounds like a Nazi when he talks, if that's the only game in town, a lot of people are going to be tempted by it. And you can repeat that principle, not just on climate change, but on like everything, like animal rights. If he's coming along and saying, okay, we're going to stop, animal agriculture, a lot of people are going to say, well, he does sound like a Nazi, but, we can get those cows out of those cages, and nobody else is addressing that. And then you repeat for economics, like people are struggling and nobody is talking to them. They're going to come along, they're going to go with the first person who comes along and says, hey, we've got a better economic system for you. Let's dynamite this one and start over. Let's reset. People are going to jump on that because there's no other thing going on. Nobody else is talking to them. It's almost like how Trump was the only person talking to working class whites. And so they jumped right on board the Trump train. Well, it's kind of similar. The World Economic Forum is the only, and that whole UN, conglomerate thing is the only major political bloc that is talking to people who want the planet to stop being destroyed, animals to stop being in factory farms, a better economic system, a world with less borders. I don't mean no borders, but more freedom to travel, and an end to these crazy visa scams where you have to pay $5,000 to visit your cousin or something like that. So if they're the only ones talking about it, then it's understandable that the left, a lot of it, would jump on board that. It's tempting. And if the right would just talk about this stuff and just address it, give people the sense that someone out there is paying attention and that there's hope and that there's some way forward, then the World Economic Forum and all those guys would not have a monopoly on this. They would no longer be the only game in town.
You want to hear what I think?
Okay.
I I almost completely disagree with you, because what they've been doing is setting up dialectics in order to advance an agenda. So they say, they start with a false premise. They say the globe is warming. It's false. They don't give you any proof of that, except for just some random smattering of like, oh, it feels like it's, yeah, I go outside and it's like 110 degrees in the middle of May, so it must be warming, and they give you these false premises, and they don't prove it, that they don't use accurate measuring equipment even for the global warming that oh shoot, what is the IPCC stations? They just give you a premise, and they say, we all know that the globe is warming, and it's like already right there. The right often just says, no, I don't agree with that. Like, I'm not going to go with you on this, but what the neocons do, the false right, is they say, um, yeah, but I don't agree it's man-made. But I'm like the real right. The real right says, wait a second, I don't agree with your premise at all. Prove that to me first before we put resources and time and thought and worry and anxiety into a non-problem. So that's a perfect example. And then they do it, they're like, we need to deal with transgender, all of these gender dysphoric people. It's like, what? Dude, there's not that many gender dysphoric people. It's like, maybe give me a figure. How many gender dysphoric people are there in the world? And then people start to think about something that's not that big of a problem, and then they start to manifest that problem. So that premise and that dialectic creates a problem that doesn't exist. And they move the Overton window as well. The left does this, and it drives me up the wall. So they move the Overton window, and these fake neocons say, I'm a conservative. I used to be concerned about transgender teens, but now that they're pushing transgender toddlers on the left, transgender teens, yeah, I can get down with that. So they moved the Overton window, so the normalcy bias is shifted, and it's like, now it seems all right. I was like, oh yeah, some people, maybe adults, when they get to the age of consent, should have their trans, what do you call it, their sex change operation covered by insurance, but not kids, because kids aren't at the age of consent yet. So that's where we are. And I'm like, no, don't ever cover transgender operations. That's a choice. That's a choice that someone made. If they want to disfigure themselves, then they can do that, but I don't recommend it, though, because there's a lot of regret if you look at the studies. Buyer's remorse. It's like voting for Biden. It's just like, once that's gone, you've chopped it off. What are you going to do? So I completely disagree that like the right has to address these problems. No, the right, everyone should be in a state of reason, in a constant state of reasoning whether things are an issue or not. But it sucks that the mere fact that someone brings that up in the mainstream media, which is the Operation Mockingbird media that brainwashes and hypnotizes everyone into believing a reality that isn't real, that it's so powerful that it gets me talking about it. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about a virus ever. It's stupid. It's inane. It's completely asinine to talk about a virus. There's no point, like if someone gets a cold or a flu, then in your family, that's an issue. How do we deal with those problems? I use a humidifier. I use vitamin C. I use zinc. I learned a lot about that because of this stupid thing. you know, but I mean, I guess I would have known that anyway, just by going on drmercola.com. Like, how do I get over a virus? And it probably has nothing to do with a virus. It's just getting over that. You know what a cold is? You know what's happening in that process? Like, your mucous membranes are just inflamed, and it needs to replace the mucous membrane. Like it's just, that's why you're coughing up all that snot, and you're spewing out the phlegm. That's what that is. So I usually can stop a virus in its track, or a cold in its tracks, where I'm just like, well, it seems like my mucous membranes are inflamed and I have a sore throat, and I just drink some extra coffee or tea, and I make sure I'm getting enough sleep, and then I usually take a little bit of vitamin C. You shouldn't overdose on vitamin C. It turns into oxalates. And then I just deal with it like that. Eat good food, don't eat cheese. That's like one of the easiest ways to avoid getting a cold. A lot of times I think I have a cold, and it's because I ate cheese the other day. So if I eat too much cheese, I get like what people would call a cold. I don't even think about viruses. It's stupid. It really is. Like, you shouldn't be wallowing in feces, but you don't need to be as clean as people think you do. In fact, people are way too clean. They take showers like every single day. That's such a waste of time, and it's bad for you. It strips your body of natural oils and all that. So they're setting up premises they can't account for rationally.
Yeah. I used to get colds pretty frequently, like once every few months. And then at the beginning of last year, I got scared of the quote pandemic back when I thought it was real. So I bought a great big year supply of vitamin D and vitamin C, and I've been taking those every day. I bought them, and so even once I figured out that the pandemic was a scam, I still bought the vitamins, so I might as well take them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been taking them every day, and I haven't had a single cold. I haven't had a single sore throat. I used to get them several times a year for a few days a piece. Nothing this entire year.
Yeah,
So
I don't even think
cold
it's antibacterial or antiviral. I think it's just nutrient sufficiency. You have sufficiency of your cells, and I don't know about zinc. Have you done anything with zinc? But I know zinc seems to really work with whatever this presentation.
I added that one in recently.
Yeah, and something to help shuttle it in, like quercetin or hydroxychloroquine, which I wouldn't take hydroxychloroquine on a regular basis because, well, you can't get it anyway. But I wouldn't just because it's by virtue of its being a pharmaceutical. So I just don't trust pharmaceuticals in general. But quercetin is just like a flavonoid, a bioflavonoid that they've figured out helps shuttle in the zinc. So I don't worry about it, and that's what it is. It's like this premise of like, what are we gonna do about this virus problem? And then they give you a bunch of numbers which are based on the over attenuation of the PCR test. So all those numbers are scaring people, and they manufacture the problem. Have you ever heard of problem reaction solution, PRS?
Yes, Rob,
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what they do. They set up a problem, and then they give you the reaction. They're like, this is how you should be reacting. You should be panicking. You should be afraid, which in turn makes you not get enough sleep. And it also makes you anxious, and it makes you binge drink, and it makes you eat bad food, and it makes you not go outside because you're afraid. And then the solution is the vaccines and masks, which is like, that's like the death blow for most people. Well, actually, the perfect PRS was at the beginning when they got people so convinced that they couldn't breathe because of this virus, that they were literally killing people in the emergency or the ICUs with ventilators. So that solution was they just killed people. I would say they killed at least 50,000 people or maybe 100,000 people in the beginning with ventilators.
Right.
Scary.
So that was a manufactured problem.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been a tiny kernel of truth to it. Maybe there really was something released from the Wuhan bio lab, but it certainly wasn't. It wasn't responsible for the vast majority of the carnage. Most of that came from the government's responses to it by keeping people inside, no sunlight, no exercise, fear, fear, fear all day, ruin your psychology, ruin your immune system, and now you're more vulnerable to all infections, not just some super virus from Wuhan, but everything, flus, colds, everything. And so, yeah, of course, people are going to get more sick. You incubate bacteria over your mouth all day and cut off your, interrupt your air exchange between inside and outside. You're going to have health problems. Your health is going to deteriorate. You're going to be more vulnerable to infections. So, yeah, people are going to get more sick because of that. And then if you count everybody who, dies from any cause as a COVID death, then boom, you have we know all this. But the other problems I mentioned
You got to do
are not
one
the
at a
same.
time. I'm not going to let you do that. That's the problem. You're like putting those all in one. I think most of those problems are dialectics that have been this left-right paradigm. That's what we're named after, the left-right paradigm. I think that's what it is, and I think most of them are. So
How about factory farming?
I
mean,
agree.
you agree with that that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So who has been the main voice, which side, I mean, has been the main voice criticizing factory farming?
Well, have you heard of Joel Salatin?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a right side, a righty, and he speaks as loudly against it. The Weston A. Price Foundation, all righties, almost all of them, they all speak against that stuff. So what I'm saying is they manufacture the dialectic and say it's about meat eating. They say this is they're like meat kills, and everybody agrees that meat kills people. And it's like, no, you and I have honed in and we agree, we've met in the place that and we've come, that's how we're going to move forward, is by people saying like, what's the real problem? What's the real problem? It's cruelty to animals. Cruelty is wrong, but we might disagree on the levels. Like you and I both think veal is bad because it's like you break the cow's legs and you leave them in a box and they don't have any quality of life. But livestock is an ancient practice, and you can follow ancient practices that favor the well-being of the animal, which in turn favors the well-being of the people who consume the animal.
Right. So, but which, out of all the people that have been activists about animal cruelty on factory farms over the past few decades, I think the majority of them have been on the left. If you find a vegan,
I agree with that.
find a vegan, chances are they're on the left. There's a few exceptions, but generally speaking, that's been an issue that the left has owned.
For normie left and normie right, I'll agree.
Right. So you
like
have
the greater Democrat populace and then the Republican base, or Democrat base and the Republican base. I think you're right. I think most Republicans that I know, I'm going to be honest, like they think but this is the propaganda that we've all swallowed on the right, that you should be allowed to like do whatever you want, and pollution isn't an issue, and like cruelty to animals isn't an issue, and like your individual rights are higher than those. And so they use sort of a truth, which is that humans are a higher being than animals, and have a higher cognition or whatever, and we have sort of dominion over it. That's how I think of it. However, they use that to further a corporate really, I think corporatism is communism. So they further their, all subsuming, all encompassing resource like hoarding of the corporatism, which is like, we are going to crap all over everybody else and just take and take and take. So that philosophy serves their needs. And I totally agree that the right buys into that hook, line, and sinker. They say, that all encompassing philosophy, they accept it, that pollution isn't that big of a deal, and they further that illusion by doing stupid stuff, by obsessing about carbon. So people are like, they are obsessed about something that's part of the atmosphere, part of nature, and what we breathe out. Carbon dioxide. It's normal. It's part of life. It's actually good for the planet. And so everybody's like, well, plastic is good for the planet. I mean, and so is oil and petrochemicals. It's natural. And then it's like, that's not really a tenable position, and nuclear. One of my big things is nuclear. I've run into some righties who are like, nuclear would be the best. I'm like, it doesn't seem like it, because you're just destroying the fabric of reality by splitting an atom. I hate that. It's like, don't you agree that there's like no way to justify splitting atoms?
Right. So tying this all into my main point here, when you have an argument between two people and one of them is saying factory farming is cruel, it's bad, you should stop it, and the other person is saying, bacon, yeah, I tortured this pig before I killed it, I'm going to torture another one just for you.
Stupid bacon.
The former is 99% of the time on the left. The latter is 99% of the time on the right. And so when you have someone like, Gates or Schwab or the fake meat companies coming along and saying, all right, we're going to use the COVID crisis to get rid of animal agriculture. There's a market for that idea because people are frustrated. They've been getting laughed at for decades whenever they try to raise these issues. And so if the right had at least, just been serious about it, and I'm not talking about you, I know you're different, but like the majority, they had been serious about that, then the World Economic Forum and the Gates Foundation would not be the only games in town. People would not just be so quick to jump on that and say, all right, whatever you say, dynamite our food system as long as we can stop this horrible factory farming practices. We'll do whatever you want if you can save the animals.
That's why we need thought leaders and who look at problems with nuance. Like, I think of Alex Jones as someone like that. He helped me to understand, and I was already moving toward that tip of GMOs are bad and things like that. And he talks about animal cruelty as well, because that was how he had some exposure to lab testing of animals. And so he talks about the animal hybrids and things like that. And in China, and like, it's been around for a while, people laugh at him, but if that was more mainstream opinion, if it was more acceptable for a righty to talk about the well-being of animals, that would be a thing. Nobody ever wants to look at like the Native Americans and try to understand what we got from them. We've gotten so much from their culture and so much from their politics, really, and their government. Like the Iroquois Nation was kind of a decentralized deal, like what we have with the Union. And it just drives me crazy. It's like there needs to be that synthesis. And there's people like Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson, and that
you down room.
Which one? Is that Jordan Peterson?
a lot of guys they come to me and they say, well, I don't know why life is treating me this way. And I'm like, well, clean your down room.
I thought you were doing Bill Gates there. I got you. No, he talks more like a woman. He's like, well, this is how a male should behave. And when I see these men coming around and they don't have any job and they don't have a woman, I'm just like, guys, you've got to man up and sort of, it's like.
And the postmodernists would say that that's all subjective. Well, guys, come on now. All right, where were we?
No, I think there needs to be thought leaders on the right, and they have started to gain a lot of prominence. So I think that the next generation and the millennials and the next generation are getting the benefit of that, whereas a lot of the pundits on the right before that were afforded to the boomers were not up to snuff and on these issues, and I think they were more likely to, and they might have been just being paid by I think a lot of money. I never like to talk about big oil, because big oil, they invest in green energy. I think they're just part of this. The scam is, a lot of the scam is saying that big oil is, just pure evil and they just greedy and they want to destroy everything. No, they just want control. Like Rockefeller was big oil. How much more big oil can you get than Rockefeller? And these old robber barons, they love the green energy thing. They love distributed, top down resource distribution. But what was I saying? Our generation and the millennials are less beholden to those things and less manipulated, and we can look at that. One of the things I love is just using that term grass-fed beef. Like if people understood what that meant, I remember this episode of Neil Cavuto when I still watched Fox News, and Neil Cavuto, it wasn't Warren Buffett's wife. It was this guy, Don Imus's wife. And Don Imus is kind of like this Republican guy, and he's not really prominent anymore. But he had a voice at some point. His wife is like an advocate for like real organic food and all this stuff, and she's on the right. Like this guy's a righty, and she mentioned to Neil Cavuto grass-fed beef, and she actually talked about coffee enemas too, and he was just like, oh, what is that? But when she said grass-fed beef, he said, that sounds disgusting. And I said, why does that sound disgusting? That's what cows eat. Cows eat grass. He's so uneducated, and so to him, he heard grass, and he thought he was hearing vegan or a vegetarian burger. So it's just it's ignorance.
Yeah. I want to talk about the carbon.
Yeah.
So we've been through this a bunch of times, but I'll just explain for our viewers that the carbon issue is mainly a distraction from the larger issue of ecological destruction. So we have deforestation, we have overfishing, we have all various kinds of pollution, we have mountaintop removal, we have the destruction of habitats, the disappearance of the insects, the collapse of the food chain, the bees, all of this stuff. Like,
I agree. The only one of the ones you said I agree on are bees.
Okay, so there's a real problem there, and then there's the largely manufactured problem of carbon, which even if it's real, it still constitutes only one aspect of the greater ecocide. And that's the aspect that they focus on, the elites, I mean. They focus on the carbon because that's the one that can be most easily quantified and most easily weaponized in order to create a new bureaucracy and a new form of control and to control people with. You know, if you set up a carbon tax, then that gives you an excuse to create a whole global bureaucracy, global, which could then be the kernel of a global tyrannical government. So that's why they're obsessed with the carbon. That's why it's the only thing they ever talk about. They never talk about deforestation, almost never.
That is, no, that's been a propaganda point from the beginning, because they don't, I think they talk about deforestation because it's a renewable resource that you can actually continue to use, and people have used for a long time. The real deforestation that's going on is when they level a forest to put in a soy monoculture. That's the problem, Danny. This monoculture crap. And nobody talks about that. Vegans love soy. Soy is terrible for the environment. If we had grass-fed cows continue to be prominent and grow in popularity, you know, it retains environments. And you know, I agree, like it's kind of dumb to like level a forest so you can have grass-fed cows. Why don't you just use like pastures that are already there, you know, and sort of retain that. But this deforestation for soy, it's like the ultimate contradiction, and that drives me insane. It makes me like take any ecologically minded lefty with a huge grain of salt, a huge grain of Himalayan salt.
Most of that soy goes to cows.
Yeah, to factory farm cows, which is where we agree. Yeah, a bunch of that's terrible. CAFO. That's what are the scourges. And then the waste from these chickens and these cows is one of the most toxic things on the planet because of what they feed them and the antibiotics, which goes back to pharmaceuticals. So we need to get. I think we should focus on pharmaceuticals. It's like defunding big pharma and disempowering big pharma, and sort of honing in on the useful things that you need, like EpiPens. But all of those EpiPens would be fine, like would be unnecessary if they would just address the problem of diabetes and of course that's insulin, but address the problem of allergies. Like people have severe allergies because of all this food and all these pharmaceuticals they've taken.
So I know, look, I'm not coming at this from the angle of like all animal agriculture is bad.
I know.
Like if there's a cow on a pasture and they're just living a nice life on the pasture and they've got all their cow brothers and sisters and family around them. I mean, that still exists. I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not horrible. And it's probably better than, I mean, it's obviously definitely better than factory farming.
Yeah.
But the problem is there's not enough scrubland to graze all the cows that everyone would need. If everyone on the planet was going to adopt a grass-fed beef diet, there's not enough scrubland on the planet to raise enough cows for everyone to rely on that as their staple. You would, in order to have enough pasture for all those cows, you have to expand beyond the scrubland. You have to expand beyond the US Southwest, the Great Plains, beyond the African scrublands. You have to start expanding into actual forest areas, and you have to cut down forests to make more pasture land. So
I think I just don't know if I agree with that premise.
there's just not enough room. I mean, look at how much land they're using in the Southwest. I know they're not using all of it. There's Bureau of Land Management rules going on. Not everyone who wants to graze can graze. I get that.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's not used to its capacity. But first of all, you can't use an ecosystem to its absolute capacity, because then if you do, there's no reservoirs of biodiversity. and you cause extinction. So you have to leave some of it preserved. And the second point is,
I think people agree on that naturally, and they come to sort of understanding that this is like a wild area, and like that's where I go. That's what I was saying about the Native Americans. They just knew how to sort of manage land, where they were like, all right, well, that's where the buffalo go, and we're gonna hunt them, and like we're gonna have a treaty with the next tribe over to where I can hunt this buffalo at this time, and then sometimes it just ebbs and flows where they don't have enough meat, so they grow some crops or whatever, and they sustain themselves. Humans tend to do that. They come to equilibriums on their own. And when you start to have people with an agenda manage the numbers and manage the treaties and manage everything's managed, like over managed, they tend to leave a little bit for themselves. That's what they do, more than a little bit. They take the majority for themselves. So they're going to take, right now, the US government, the federal government owns like 25% of the land, to my understanding. So we don't have access to like all of this land because they keep it for themselves. Now, is that something we agreed to? That's the question. If we had a contract, that's what the government is, right? It's a contract between the people that we're going to sort of abide by these rules. Now, if that's true, and it's like, yeah, we want Yosemite, I think we can all agree, let's keep Yosemite, let's keep the Ozarks, and let's keep the Adirondacks, and let's keep the Catskill Mountains, as wilderness, because that's the wilderness is really hard to even develop it anyway. Then we do it. We tend to agree to that.
I'm referring to smaller scale reservoirs. I mean those are all great, but I mean, like, every mile or so you need like a stand or an area that's untouched, so that that area can retain the plants and animals that are otherwise eradicated for farming or grazing, so that they can then repollinate or reseed. I'm talking about like small scale, like bits, like here's grazing, here's not grazing, here's grazing, here's not grazing. But
we culturally do that. Humans like to be on like a plot of a few acres. So we should live in a house with just a couple acres around us. And usually people like their backyard to be what it is. Right. Except they use pesticides and crap, and they do stupid stuff and fertilizer. They do idiot stuff. I think that should be illegalized because it contaminates everyone else's property who doesn't want that. That is against, the will of their neighbors. That's where it's like your freedom only goes as far as you can swing it back. So that's how I would do what you say. I would just have backyards, nice backyards, gardens.
Okay, fair enough. Mm-hmm. But still, in the end, even if we do that, or even if we don't do that and just graze the entire thing, either way, there's still just not enough space for everyone on the planet, all 7 or 8 billion of us, to all eat a grass-fed beef diet, unless we deforest in order to make more room for more cows. We're going to have to keep cutting down forests as the population expands if we're going to want to do this. Even if we don't even eat cows, even if we're all vegetarians, even then, as you have an expanding population, you need more farmland. So that means you need to cut down more forests. So even if we were all vegetarians, that still wouldn't completely solve the problem. The problem is much deeper than that. It's the whole arrangement of our economy. It's arranged in such a way that is so inefficient because of the scale at which we arrange our economy. We don't do things locally anymore. We do things at such large scales where your food comes from 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away or the other side of the planet. And you need roads to get it there, and you need cars and trucks to deliver it, and you need all this infrastructure in order to transport all this food to you. And then there's just like 100 other ways in which our social arrangement makes unnecessary duplication of tools and resources, unnecessary waste, inefficiency. Where if we're going to live in balance, we do have to redo the system. And I don't mean redo it to some new technocratic 5G smart city monstrosity. I'm talking about redo it away from technocracy, back to the original way. And like people get confused about that a lot. They say, "Oh, you want to socially engineer? You want to re-engineer society? Oh, I bet that means that you want
No,
to have
it
5G
needs to be-
satellites beaming down and controlling everybody." No,
That's
it
what
means I want to go back to what our great grandparents had.
yeah.
We need to actually do that.
Ancestral, yeah, ancestral knowledge is the key. So it essentially needs to become a religion or like a philosophy. So that's what we're doing. You and I are promoting a philosophy of local, organic, you know, like holistic health and economy that favors this ancestral, and that's why I'm on the right. Like you said, I'm like in reverse. I'm like rear view mirror. I'm like, we've got ancestral knowledge that's been destroyed, has been slowly degraded, and it's disgusting, and it makes me angry that they've known certain things for a very long time, like the Weston A. Price thing. Everyone's culture in all of these places, and they're very diet. That's what you are. You are what you eat. They became sick because they took away these people's staple foods. They took away their organ meats and their animal foods. They took away their dairy. They're like, dairy's bad. Butter is very good for you, and eggs and fish, and at least they still promote fish. But fish is like almost all toxic now because of, that's probably why they're okay with it, and they love their fish farms, which are easy to manage. But anyway, I agree. Like ancestral knowledge. And it needs to be almost like religious. And I was going to compare it to Amish, even though the Amish do a lot of things wrong. They use the factory pesticides. They use the industrial chemicals. They're terrible. And they even use cell phones now. So it's ridiculous. But yeah, the philosophy needs to be promoted. And I think most people like you and I can get on board with that philosophy. And we mostly agree that local needs to be favored and the use of chemicals needs to be curtailed. And that's like that goes a long way. Like we can argue all day long about so many things, but with that common goal and the medical tyranny, the medical fascism, is that you being united against that is going to save the world.
How are we doing on time? When did we start?
I don't know. Let me take a gander.
Because I want to, let's try to wrap this up in under an hour.
I can't rightly say I see your time. So you sort of just got to feel it out. I would guess that we've been going at it for about 45 minutes.
I reckon it was a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
No, hey, it might be about that. Anyway,
We've been
I
going
want to
on.
wrap this up. So I want to say that I know that you're on the same page as I am about a lot of that, especially regarding the agriculture. But a lot of the people on the right have not. And that's why I want to emphasize this point that the right needs to step up their game so that this doesn't happen again. Because, like I said, the reason that the left is being, falling for the World Economic Forum and the Gates stuff and all that, because there's been a vacuum for all these years. The right hasn't been talking about this, and I know that you're talking about it, and I appreciate that a lot.
Mm-hmm. But I gave you some examples of who is talking about it.
Right, I know, but they're a small minority.
Right,
They're
but
not the
that's who's
majority.
taking over. Like
Find your average Bush Republican or something.
Yeah.
Bush, Romney, McCain, Republican, they're not talking about this.
Mhm.
You are, but they're not. So there's got to be a little more dialogue on this. Then the lefties will not think that the technocrats are the only game in town. Then we can have a real, we can join together and cooperate to solve these problems, and uh,
But it's
we'll take away
bringing,
their monopoly.
we're bringing the truth to light, and that's where I'm a true believer in Christ, and I'm a true believer in Logos, which he is Christ, which is the truth. And when you tell the truth, and when you discuss truth and you pass it on, even if the person doesn't agree with the spiritual meaning of it or the origin of it or the history, truth is catchy. Truth is contagious, and that's how you can change the world. I think spreading information and knowledge, and that if we could come to that understanding, at least once a week with some person that you run across on the internet, where you're just like, you find someone on the left and you say like, I'll give the advice to righties. Just find someone on the left and tell them, because Danny might not have known that there are people like me. Did you know that, or what? I mean, I know you were watching. You were watching Alex Jones, so you knew that. But did you know there were people who actually understood it?
Well, I never heard Alex Jones talk about factory farming or the real ecocide, or I've never heard him address any of that.
Oh, really?
As far as I know, he's only ever denied it. That's as far as I know.
No. He doesn't. He's a proponent. He's even a proponent for the rights of the beings that are created when you genetically modify a human. He's like, he gets angry about it, that they treat these animals like that, or these beings. But he thinks they're obviously an abomination, but it's still cruel to like create something with consciousness and then abuse it. That's pretty sick, very sick. To create like a half human, half animal thing, this disgrace. I know that sounds crazy to most people. You can look it up. That this has been going on for a long time. You believe in human animal hybrids?
Well, they admit that they're doing it. I don't know
Right.
where the doubt is.
So I would just do what Danny says and sort of enlighten. He's right. That's what people are looking for from the right. They're not looking for you to just dismiss things. And if you are going to dismiss it, it's your right to do that. Like I said, I dismiss any and all and reject any and all discussion or fear mongering about illness and virus, infectious illness. I just reject that almost entirely. I'm not going to sit around and think of ways to stop the spread of disease. I think about, conditions like, you don't want to be in a bubonic plague level filth. Like filthy conditions will make you sick, like living on top of a cesspool. That was what happened in the bubonic plague. They were living on top of a cesspool and they were dumping all their waste on the street. So yeah, if you live, you're going to get dysentery. You get all this disease from living in your own filth. That is the truth. Sewage or irrigation. Wait, what is the word I'm thinking of? Potable water and plumbing is like the most effective way to avoid those problems, or just living far apart on 4 acres of land. And if you have an outhouse or whatever, as long as your waste isn't pumped full of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, you can have you can dump, because you basically bury your waste. That's normal, septic tanks and all that stuff. But the idea is not living in these confined spaces, which is what they want. It only works if you have a completely nanobotted population. The amount of crushed together sardines people they won in the Agenda 21. You know about that, right? Like the super cities, like stacked up. The only way that works is with a perfect efficiency and a perfect nanobotted 5G surveillance grid. That's the only way. Managed resources.
Okay, so let's wrap this up.
Okay,
So
wrap it up. Give me a little rap. Drop some rhymes.
Wrap it up, B.
Never heard you freestyle. You're probably a good freestyler.
I don't know how to do that.
No?
Nah.
Drop me a little science over there. Do it in like a garage style.
I already dropped you your science. You aren't paying attention to the science. NHS says that you've got to maintain 6 foot distance and follow the masking guidelines, and you can't go out for your jog or to the beach or nothing like that. You've got to stay at home in your house and not go out until Secretary Hancock says you're free to go out. You need your hall pass. You need a hall pass to go out.
Now that's just bollocks, mate. I'm not going to follow those coronavirus restrictions. I'm not going to wear a bleeding mask, okay? I'm going to
Well,
go out
you're
and I'm going to go
leaving
to
me
a
with no
KPI
choice.
protest.
I'm going to have to place you under arrest if you're not going to
You
comply.
ain't going to arrest
You're
me.
leaving me with no choice.
You don't have a right. You're not going to arrest me. So you better turn around and get.
You haven't got no rights. It's the middle of a bloody pandemic. What are you talking about rights for? You're going to kill somebody. You're going to kill your grandma if you go outside. You don't. It's not about rights. It's about we're all in this together, and you've got to cooperate so we can beat the virus.
Now listen here. If I was to say you don't have rights because you had a bleeding lurgy, every time you're not allowed to leave the house, you just got to stay inside, watch TV, and just have a wank, then what will you do? There will be no more jobs left. There'll be no more society.
I don't know where you're getting these bloody wacko conspiracy theories.
David
But
Icke.
I know that the law says you've got to mask up and you've got to stay in your house. And I don't want to talk about you. Look, you can believe whatever you want to believe, whatever you found on the internet about how Bill Gates is going to vaccinate you with chips and all that. You can believe it all you want. It's a free country, eh? You can believe whatever you want, but you can't go outside until the NHS says that you can go outside. That's the law. So I'm going to have to place you under arrest now.
You know what? We should call this episode Fish and Chips. We were talking about fish, fisheries, and we were talking about chips just now. Chip you, microchip in the arm, in the end, I got a microchip. Helps me buy my stuff. Don't have to shake hands with no one. Don't have to change cash. Ban the cash. Ban it all. And so, right? Who's this?
In Cebu.
No. I get to do it first.
There will be no fish and chips. That is right out.
No, mate. That sounds terrible. Now listen here. We took you down once, you Nazi. How do they say Nazi? Nazi.
No.
You're bleeding Nazis. Anyway, Churchill. So anyway, that about wraps it up for us here on the Left Right Pair, guys. Just make sure that you do your prayers. Pray for Q. Pray for the NHS. Pray for the left, the wayward left. Pray for them, and I'm sure that Jesus is going to get them in the end.
Rob, the left right pair guys are truth tellers. When they speak, listen carefully.
Are two what? Oh, truth
Yeah.
teller, truth teller, right.
When they speak, listen carefully.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Yeah, we didn't even talk about all this crazy stuff happened, but we'll do it next time. That's
Sure.
Danny has fallen aside. He doesn't want to look at the plan. He doesn't want to trust the plan anymore. So
Hang on. I just told you at the beginning of this episode that I think the plan's not over.
yeah.
Well, anyway, so we're the left right pair guys. I have a website called the Earth Party. I'm building a new political party to unite the left and the right to defeat technocracy. It's called the Earth Party. It's www.theearthparty.net. You can find all the plans there.
It's a pretty good website, folks. I would recommend you spend time going through the technocracy portion and his material about masks and how ridiculous they are, but also what they signify. And my favorite one is wearing a mask is selfless or selfish.
Selfish.
Wearing a mask is selfish, and we're selfless for not wearing a mask. So, because we are putting ourselves on the line, but we're putting ourselves on the line to advocate for your rights. And me and Danny have been doing that. So I recommend you not wear a mask. And let's leave it at that. It's a good way to end.
I want to thank Robert and Danny, two great patriots who love our great country. They have put out a very great podcast today. I
Vodka.
recommend everyone watch it. It's great. And they're going to make America great. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. God bless America.